Okay, I see people are starting to assemble, which is a good thing. I want to make sure that my mic is working and that I can hear. So if you can hear me, let me know. Just doing a little test here. All right, great here. Thanks, Ramon. One second, folks. I am testing one little piece here, and I'll be ready to roll. Make sure I close out of that. Almost. Okay, now let me try it. Okay. Very good. I am glad to see all of you here today. Looks like we have a nice little crowd assembled. Now, I noticed that during the class today, several of you said that you would have some things to add. So that's a good thing. I did want to say that next week we're beginning our study of the book of Exodus. So we're going to roll right into Exodus. I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to that, and hopefully you are as well. These classes are still going to be played each Sabbath as Seth and I continue to work on our study on getting ready to do our teaching, our series on the Northern Prophets. So we'll give you an update on that maybe a little bit as well. I also wanted to remind people that beginning this week, we're going to, Jono and I are going to go into a new podcast series on all things Shapira. I'm calling it Shapiraology, but we're going to begin that study with a series. I guess you would call it an episode, our first episode in this season that we're going to call Infamous, 16 Infamous Fragments. So that's where we're going to begin. So I'm really looking forward to that, and hopefully you are as well. So those are going to be Wednesday nights. We'll be recording that live with this group, and then Thursday is, at least as far as we know, we're going to continue to release those on Thursday. So what are some of your thoughts today? Today's class was on VaYechi. We finished up the book of Genesis. We wrapped up the story of Joseph. It was a story that involved the death of a couple of the patriarchs. We saw both Jacob and Joseph die, and yet it's called "And He Lived," which I think is significant. So I see Mr. Tyler. I'm going to invite Mr. Tyler to the stage. How are you today, Dave?
Hey, Ross and everyone. I'm doing well. It's very strange time of the year for us, but I do try to work with my friends and I don't let the Christmas thing like I used to. I don't get angry at it anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's
um,
over anyway now,
it,
so you don't have to worry
it
about it. It's
it is,
done.
and the other thing is, which I'll say, which will feed into my real issue is, you know, um, in preparing my talk for the annual conference, I I realized how far we've all come. I can speak for myself only, and my wife to some degree, but you and a lot of the people here have all come in these different paths to follow the Decalogue faith. And so this chapter, the ending of Genesis is extremely powerful. And there are many, many tangential issues that are brought up that people don't realize. But I think one of the things that we have to realize at the end of his life, Jacob, he he did kind of pick two of his sons, and just because you're part of the chosen group doesn't mean you can't misbehave. That you can misbehave, you can't misbehave, and there's for the choices you made in your life and the things you do, you are responsible personally, whether you're a chosen
Right.
one or not a chosen one. And I think this is very self-evident. Now, you as a dad and me as a dad, and many fathers and mothers in here, we it is very difficult to deal with this when they're your children. We somehow have a way of saying we can judge others a little easier and it doesn't get personal, but this had to be very personal for Jacob because it was his children, and I'm sure he still loved them, but they just did such horrible things, um, you know. And then finally, I'll end up with the comment that a Jewish friend of mine said, "Eh, it's the only religion where they really write about all the bad things the family did." And
Yeah.
I think that adds to its credibility that it's not just all the perfect, everything was beautiful and we're great. We did many things, and as you know, kind of at the end of the prophets, Jehovah says, "Look, just come back and be my people, and I'll be your God." I mean, he
Yeah.
loves them too. And so I just think this is one of the most powerful historical chapters. I like the Deuteronomy 30 chapter, was my dad's favorite chapter,
Oh yeah.
um, and but I think this is one that's extremely powerful. Kind of like Second Samuel chapter 7 and some of the other great chapters in the Bible that really stand out. They're all meaningful and so forth, but I think this is really the summary of the life of the founder of Israel, Jacob. So that's all I wanted to say.
What's your favorite part in this reading? Is it the fact that it's the blessing of Jacob that goes to the sons? Is that your favorite part
Yeah,
of?
I think that's just an amazing. Um, you know, my dad never sat down and gave me a reading of my life,
Right.
but the point is that Jacob had to do this because he was the father of a great nation that Jehovah chose, and the lineage, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is it's the end of the patriarchs. Now we're going to get into some other very meaningful stuff of the family, the cousins, the brothers, the sisters, and it gets messy. And
Yeah.
Jacob kind of set the that was his that's like his last will and testament. This is what it's going to be, kids. And that's
Yeah.
powerful, in my opinion. Very
Yeah.
powerful. And I think this is, it was a great talk. And I think it's brought up a lot of these good issues. There were a lot of issues that people were starting to talk about that were taken away from your discussions. So I thought here's where we could talk about them. I do have and spent a lot of time on the Anglo-Israeli theory and other theories that are out there regarding the lost tribes. So there's Jewish and Christian religious traditions. There's historical and archaeological theories. There's ethnological theories. There's of course the mystical and esoteric theories. There's modern Israeli movements, of course British Israelism,
Right.
or Anglo-Israeli theory, the lost tribes claimed by ethnic groups, and there's also kind of the symbolic and allegorical interpretations. So it kind of fit in with, this discussion. It's a difficult thing to really determine what is really meant by all these things, and the exegesis of the Bible as it unfolds in Exodus, and then in Numbers and Judges and Deuteronomy give us a lot more information. And then there's the writings and the prophets. So
Yeah.
it's not some simple thing you can just say, oh, here's the answer. So I keep my mind open and listen to everyone, and I try to contemplate it. I don't, again, as I try to tell the people that I live with, it's all good to look at this and think about it, but let's also remember the Decalogue faith and practice that every day. And that's the first thing on my mind. The 10 um, words, and then I look at the other stuff later. And then also some people get really hung up on eschatology, and I love the subject. It's very beautiful and interesting, but it's much more important for me to live the Decalogue faith, and hopefully be judged on my actions, as I understood the Decalogue faith, which has changed since the last 30, 40 years. It's changed a lot. So anyways, I think it's a great and very important, if we're going to understand what happens to Israel and the rest of the people from then on. It's very foundational, I guess, is what I would say, Ross. And I'm glad that we went through that today.
Hey, I'm glad you're here, Dave. I've been to the library at your house, you and Patty, and I've seen. I know that you and I have read many of the same books on the various theories on what happened to Israel. Who is Israel? So if you
Right.
stick around, if you can, I know you usually do, but
Yeah. Yeah,
we
I'm
might get
gonna.
into
Yeah.
more of this in a few minutes. So don't run off. Just stick
I'm not
around,
gonna.
and I'll.
Like I said, it was a great class, and I really did. I do think the other thing is, Ross, I'll say this last thing. You know, United Israel as a group has talked about this for decades, and
Yeah.
a lot of people are new to our group. We're not a religion; we're an educational foundation, and we have a faith. But it's pretty broad. It's just
Yeah.
like, if you're interested in studying the Hebrew Bible, then come and talk. But it's good that a lot of the stuff that you and I have spoken of, Dr. Tabor, Ralph, and Timothy. We've spoken of this stuff for years, but not everybody was involved and privy to those conversations. So I think it's
That's
good
right.
that we bring these discussions up. And secondly, I'll say this: now that I look at it from 10 years ago, I see it very differently. And I hope that means my faith and my understanding of what Jehovah wants is growing. And,
Yeah.
that's all I'm saying.
May that be
All right.
so for
Thank
all
you.
of us. All right, man. Stick
Yeah.
around. All right. I see. First of all, I'm going to invite Eric up to the stage, and then Betty, you're next. I did want to say that we are watching the comments also in YouTube, so hopefully that will help. I'm going to post before I turn the mic over to Eric. I'm going to post in the chat the link for registration for the conference. This will be our 81st annual conference slash meeting of United Israel World Union. As Dave just put it, we've been working on this material for decades, not just us, but people even before us. So hopefully you can come. There's no cost for the conference. We can't get your hotel room for you. But we will make sure that everything else is pretty much covered. If you can come in, and some people bring their food so that they don't have to spend money at restaurants, and we'll prepare some of the food here as much as we can with a local group. But anyway, so I posted the conference link there. If you are coming, we do ask that you register. We don't need you to pay, but we do need you to register because we want to see what this is going to look like and be able to plan for it. What happened at Woodstock, as I understand it, is they didn't know that many people were going to show up. So at least do the registration, and we appreciate it. Eric, welcome to the stage, my friend. How are you?
Shalom, I'm doing well. I wanted to follow up from Dave in agreement with how many ways you can study who is Israel. And when my group years ago got to this point, it became obvious to many of us that the simple way to divide it all up, or whatever the word would be, is to say, well, I like the part where he says, if you're adopted, you're even more than the firstborn. So all you have to do is join him, and you're a step ahead of trying to figure out who you are because you're
Yeah.
them, you're him. Uh, and it was at this same place where we discussed a week or so ago, where we started looking very carefully backwards at where it says Jacob and Israel, because it bounced right in our eyes right here in this section that it says Jacob, and the next time it says Israel, back and forth. And we made some sense of it, but I'll love to hear if anybody else does. Thank you.
Let, let me ask you while you're on stage, Eric. You've mentioned several times, I think you look favorably upon the group that you were part of, and I do that as well. Some of the groups that I was part of over my spiritual journey. Was that group, if you don't mind me asking, what that group, did it come to an understanding that quite possibly people who were being drawn back to this faith could actually literally be perhaps part of Israel? Was that part of it? Did you already tell me that and I've just forgotten? I just wanted to make sure.
No, I think it didn't matter to us whether you thought you were one of the tribes or not. It was always interesting to look into it. I always have felt that it if you join Israel, you get to pick the tribe you live with. It just, I mean, that's my free flow of thought because always considered myself part of Ephraim
Yeah,
or Joseph. I mean, however you want to put that. Then when I started seeing what my mom and dad had done in genealogy and some of the other works on where some of these tribes may have ended up, now I'm starting to think maybe it was the tribe of Dan because there's some family history and other things that point to coming out of Germany and where some of our relatives in history went from there. And of course, there's always my Swedish side, which was Lake Erickson,
yeah.
uh, who turns out to be a Christian missionary. So I've got a bunch of preaching and teaching in my blood.
um, what else? What else do you have for us this morning, Eric? I'm looking to invite the next person on stage, unless you still have some good wisdom, in case you want to do some of that preaching from your heritage today.
No, I'll save
Not
that for another time.
all right,
Thanks.
my brother. All right, man. I am inviting Miss Betty. How are you today, Betty? Invited you to the
Yay.
stage. Look at that.
I
Everything
am
is
so ha
working just like it's supposed
It
to.
is, and I even got my picture up, even though it's like 7 years old. I don't
That's
look
all
like
right.
that anymore, but that's okay.
That's okay.
Oh, anyway, I'm just excited that I got on today. I've been having so much trouble. I'm not sure even how I did it, but it worked.
Well, that's
And
the
thanks
main thing,
for, helping me a bit. Um, I First of all, thank you, Ross. Your excellent lesson. Just I always learn something, even though I never really feel like I know it all, but I always learn something new, and that's exciting. I think that as long as we're learning, we're living. When we stop
right?
learning, we basically stop living. Um, anyway, to go along a little bit with Dave and what Eric said, in my Joseph's articles, I did mention a concept that I've dubbed DNA of the heart. And I mean, I know it's not necessarily a biblical concept, but maybe it is because, we may not know what tribe we're from or if we're from a tribe at all. We may not
Yeah.
know, but that's okay because Hashem keeps track of every one of us and no one is going to be lost. But for some of us, it feels almost like the call of like a homing pigeon. It's like beep, 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 beep. You gotta go, you gotta go, you gotta whatever, and you follow it. And to me, that is the heart, and it's leading you or leading us, whoever, to Torah.
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily a physical DNA, although some of us have been able to trace that. The other thing I thought was interesting, and I wanted to bring it out last week, but I couldn't speak. I don't know what was wrong. But I think it's interesting that in the last Torah portion, VaYechi, when Judah drew near to protect his brother Benjamin, I think it's interesting that when the tribes were divided, that Benjamin ended up alongside or with the tribe of Judah. So Judah is still protecting Benjamin for some, I don't know. I don't know the significance of that. I just think that it's interesting.
Yeah.
And also, if you take the blessings of Yaakov or Israel to his children in VaYechi and compare them to the ones of Moshe to the tribes as he's about to die, it's really very interesting. And there are some direct parallels. And one is with Ephraim in Deuteronomy 33:17. It says of Joseph, or rather, of Joseph, but he'll push the peoples all together, to the ends of the earth, and they are the 10,000s of Ephraim and the thousands of Manasseh.
Hmm.
And to me, that's very similar to the one in 49. Now I lost it.
In
Where he talks
Genesis
about
49.
Ephraim
Yeah.
will complete the nations. So, and I'm not sure exactly what all that means, except that there will be a lot of them. I know you mentioned that it wasn't just a multitude, it was more like standing together like a school of fish.
Yeah.
But perhaps we need to first do that individually. We come to our God, and then we are standing together and gathering together like we are in Yachad as one. So
Good
just a
thoughts.
couple of thoughts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead.
No, no, this is something different, but let me just throw it out there, and then I want to hear your response. Is that in the chat, Marlene, who I think is on YouTube, mentioned the prodigal son.
Yeah.
And I think that has to do with the vexing and the jealousy. There's a lot going on, and that is still going on today.
Mm-hmm.
We can see it. So
Yep. Yeah, that's
anyway,
yeah, those are good points. And Marlene's point about the prodigal son is very, very, very important when we talk about the tribes. A person might say, "Well, I'm Jewish and I don't know anything, don't accept anything from the New Testament or Christianity." But this is clearly, contextually, historically, seems to be something which fits into this line of thinking. And what makes it so interesting is that many people miss this and they never even notice that the story is very clearly speaking of these two brothers. The older
right.
stays home with dad and keeps the commandments, and the other brother goes away and ends up wasting his inheritance and so forth. But that joy that is evident when the prodigal, as we call him, thanks to our good authorized English version, when the prodigal does return, there's rejoicing in heaven, is the way it's put. I think that's one of the most powerful stories. And we get from the Christian writings there's quite a bit actually about the tribes, and it's beginning to be recognized now, let's say within the last 20
Mhm.
years, whereas it wasn't, other than a few groups. I guess maybe Armstrong and some of those groups recognized it earlier, but
Yeah.
very limited in terms of Christianity recognized the powerful material that's in the New Testament. For instance, not only does Jesus say in Matthew chapter 10, verse 6, Matthew 15, verse 24, not only does he say there,
Mhm.
10:6, he sends his disciples to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And then in
Yeah.
15 and 24, he says in Matthew, he was only sent to this group. Then you've got James, the writer of the letter, James, who apparently, from what we believe, academics believe that this is supposed to be the James, the brother of Jesus. And he writes his letter
Yes.
to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. Peter writes his
Mhm.
letter to those who are scattered in Bithynia and all these other places.
Right.
So, I mean, we get lots and lots of things. In fact, there is a new academic book that I don't have within reach. I think the author's name is Jacob Staples, or maybe Jason Staples, or maybe both of those names are wrong. I don't know. I'll look it up and I'll post it in the
Mm.
Discord and share it on our other outreaches for those that aren't on Discord. But it's I think it's Jason Staples, and it's about an academic look at the New Testament as it pertains to this regathering of the tribes. And let's face it, so many of us, I would venture to say, just looking at the names, that almost all of you, if not all of you, began in some form of Christianity or some, and you made it, you followed your heart, you followed the clues to a
Yes.
Torah-oriented faith. So I know that was a little bit longer than what you were asking for, Betty, but I mean, I'm
No.
passionate about it because it was one of the things that brought me to this place. I tell people all the time, you can dismiss your Christian faith, you can walk away from Jesus, you can do whatever you want, but don't talk bad about Jesus in front of me. I'll shut you down. And I'll shut you down from the
No.
text because I mean
Me neither.
it's
And I've
yeah.
I've done that online and with one group in particular and thought I was gonna get kicked off, but I
Yeah.
wasn't
Well,
because
I would
I'm just not
happily
gonna
leave a group that made fun of Jesus, so
um well, I chose not to leave, but to stay,
yeah.
because it was one person in particular that was doing this, and I just, stood my ground and stood up for him because he's the
Mhm.
one who brought me where I am. And
Yep.
I know if you will remember, I'm not sure what year it was, early 90s, when Roger and I came by and you and I had this conversation, this late conversation about the tribes and
I
Jesus.
do
And
remember.
I will always remember that. But I just think we have to be careful with not throwing out, as the adage goes, the baby with the bathwater,
Yep.
because there is a lot of good, and we need to be thankful for where we've come and for everything that we've been through to bring us to who we are and where we are today.
That's right.
So
Amen. Yep, I
that's
definitely remember that conversation, and we'll have to see. Maybe we'll get into the details of that at some point because it's
mhm,
not only because I knew you before I met Dr. Tabor James, who at the
right,
time I did not know that was your brother, if you recall. I just didn't know that piece of information. So,
right.
so,
That
but yeah,
meeting
we'll
was
have to
quite,
tell it.
as- yeah, as
It's
James would say, was
providential.
quite providential. Amen.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, thank you
Anyway,
very much, Betty. I'm glad that everything's working. Hang tight. You might need to jump back on stage again in a moment. I'm going to
okay,
bring
okay.
up
All righty.
Jim
Thank you.
Brumgard. I want to hear what Jim has to say. So, Jim, I'm going to invite you on the stage. Welcome, Jim. Good to have you with us today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good afternoon. Hey, I just a couple things popped out in the lesson today that in a thought process I hadn't had before, and that was the comment about the prophecy of being a nation and a company of nations.
Uh huh.
It makes me think, well, that's kind of how it ended up with Judah and then the northern tribes. they were a group of nations versus just the single nation of Judah. Of course, I like the connection that was brought out earlier about Benjamin and Judah having a special connection too.
Yeah.
Hadn't looked at that. That was great of Betty to bring that up. So that was the one way of looking at that. I have also heard that back through the Armstrong days, that they took that to be England and then the United States or vice versa.
Right.
There's two ways you could flip that coin, because England had so many colonies all over the globe. But that's really more of a discussion for another time. There was one other thought, and I'm trying to remember what it was that I was going to bring up. Oh yeah, Joseph being a fruitful bough where he
Yep.
overflows the wall.
Hmm.
That made me think of that perhaps the land of Israel won't be big enough to hold all of Joseph, and where
Oh,
else
good
Joseph
point.
may end up residing. Where they might reside, that's to be determined. But that's always been a thought on my mind, that there may not be room for all that Joseph might bring back. So, or
Yeah,
might have
I
back.
like that. I don't know, like you, I don't know if that's exactly what it's pointing to, but I do like the idea and make the connection now that you mention it, because clearly the prophets do suggest that the tribes, when they return, will say, "This land isn't big enough," and they'll spill into Gilead. They'll spend and as we know, the Gilead and all of that area is east of the Jordan, and there are people who feel a drawing to the things that we're talking about now, who might believe that, perhaps they're from the tribes or whatever, and they're moving back because they might not be able to get into Israel. Some are going to Jordan. In fact, I see Sue is with us, Sue Wyatt. She and her husband years ago moved to Jordan. I don't know if it was because of that connection, but who knows? I mean, at some point, according to the prophets, this is what's going to happen. So it's all exciting if you think about it.
Yeah, and lastly, just to comment on things that were said earlier, yeah, whether I'm of a tribe or not, the fact that I'm drawn to where I'm at, um, it's there's always a sojourner that can join, and I like the idea that Eric brought up about even having a more special place because you choose to be part of the faith. So
That's where I'm
anyhow,
at
that's
too, Jim. I tell people I did my genealogy because I thought, man, there's something going on. You don't totally turn your life upside down and your family's life upside down, and I know I'm going to test this, and I'm going to be a descendant of the great Rambam or something. And I did the test and sent it off, and basically my DNA says you don't have a drop, you don't have a speck of anything related to what we now would identify as Jewish blood in you. So you're a Hittite, basically. So I came
right.
to the place where I said, look, I don't know. I mean, I know more now about DNA and those kind of things where it wouldn't, but it didn't really disappoint me as much as it sort of was a slap in the face. I expected so much to find that I was related to my Jewish friends, and maybe that would then explain my desire to really get into this. But when it didn't turn out that way, I really did start thinking, well, wait a minute now. If you read like Isaiah 56, that is very, very clearly one of the most important passages in the Hebrew Bible, because it says exactly what you just said and what Eric said, that ultimately those who attach themselves to the covenant, they're welcomed. In fact, they receive a place of honor. So that's kind of where I'm at with
Yep.
it. I don't know.
And one last comment: the
Sure.
idea that we come from, many of us come from some sort of Christian background. To me, I've always been curious, where to get where I'm at now, to think back that, yeah, that Bible that I had always did have that Old Testament in it. So it's like the Christian faith, there's a pathway back to Torah faith in it.
Yeah.
So
That's right. All we
got
have
to
to
look
do
for it.
is read it. That's right. Yeah. Imagine that. Read a book from the beginning, and it's amazing. It was it Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, who said, something about the greatest cure for Christianity is when a man reads his Bible, or I may get the quote wrong. It may not have been him, but something like that. But that's
Yep.
true for all man-made religions, I think. As we delve into the text, I mean, I know some of you better than others, but you know, people that I talk to at length about their personal journey, it always sounds a little bit similar. You know, like somebody says, "Well, I was very active in church." I hear it. You know, I was a song leader. I was a music ministry. I was this. I was a preacher. I was this. I mean, these aren't people who take their Christianity lightly, but they began to see problems in the text, and they began to work themselves towards a redefine their faith as a more Hebraically oriented pattern faith. You know, and a lot of times it sounds very similar if you back up and you don't look at the specifics so much, but yeah, we're all in a unique place. That's what I love about this group, is that so many of us have totally unique stories, but in a way, like if you told me your whole story, if we had time, I would say, wow, that's an incredible journey you've had. And here's where mine sounds a little bit like that. You could do the same with mine. It's amazing.
Yep.
It's almost like someone is orchestrating this, like the guiding good hand of God, maybe.
Something's out there.
Something's going on. Hey, thanks for your comments, Jim. Anything else?
No, that's it for now. So.
All right. Thanks, my brother. I appreciate it. Shabbat shalom. Have a wonderful day. Look, I've got time. If others want to ask questions, comments, okay, now I see some hands popping up. Let me scroll down, and Eric, I see you. I'm going to invite you back on the stage. We stirred you up again, so as soon as you jump up there you are.
Yeah, well, talking about reading and being from a history professor and a librarian, it kind of fits that I read books a lot. And what happened for me at the age of somewhere around 47, when I, as some say, got reborn,
Yeah,
the first church I went to, I heard was, we've got a contest going and hope everybody's joined in of reading the Bible the quickest, or something along those
yeah.
lines. And I said, well, I've already started. Is it okay if I join in? And they said, oh, yeah, it doesn't matter when you start. And that's what turned me around, was reading all the way from the beginning. A couple
Yep.
times by the time I figured out what was coming from the pulpit wasn't the same as what I was reading, and that's when history was made. Anyway, that was my quickie.
Well, I tell you, and Clody, by the way, I see you. I'm going to bring you up next, but you just reminded me stories on my exit. Like as I was preparing to get out of church, I remember one of the last church services I was in. Now I'm a problem for my family by this point. Like I remember my wife being really upset with me one time, and she said this was a really intense discussion, let's call it. She said, every time I meet someone and make a friend, Ross, you pull us out of that church because the preacher says one thing wrong. And I was really doing that. I remember. And one of the thing that got me, I remember this preacher was going through every text that dealt with the Sabbath. And yet we were there on a Sunday morning, and I'm thinking, praise God, like I was almost charismatic at this point, and I was like, praise God, this guy gets it finally, because he was going through about what Exodus 31 and the Shabbat, and well, he was just saying Sabbath, the Sabbath, the Sabbath, the Sabbath, and then he gets to the end, like right before the altar call, and he says, and thank God it's Sunday. Now stick around, folks. We're having hot dogs out in the parking lot today. You know, like everybody's going to eat hot. And sure enough, pork hot dogs, and he thought the Sabbath was Sunday,
Yeah.
and that was it for me. I was like, I'm done. I'm out. I got to leave. But so many of us, and that's not a persecution. I haven't suffered for my faith in that sense. But how many of us have just said, I cannot do this anymore. I don't care if I'm all alone on this.
Right.
And but I still look favorably on my experience and my upbringing being raised in the biblical text because it's the love of my life, in this sense.
Yeah. I got
Uh,
right there at that point, and then suddenly lost one job and got another one. Is working for a Christian school, and I taught by example for 17 years before they suddenly said, "You're out of here."
yeah. Well, they call
And
that
it
the
was
left foot of fellowship.
yeah, it kind of was, and I wasn't the only one, so I
Yeah,
don't feel bad, and I didn't get real hurt. But initially, I thought, "Thank you, Father, for this wonderful opportunity to do something else." But where am I going?
yeah,
Anyway, it was very instructive, and all those years we put on a public feast, we had hundreds of people show up, lots of church people, but no one ever came to Torah study,
yeah,
not once. And they were invites on every bulletin board in the school for nearly 10 years, I'd say.
yeah.
Anyway,
Man,
let Chloe come up.
I will. Okay, thanks, Eric. I appreciate you, man. I'm going to bring Clody up in just a second. Let me pick up a couple of the comments from the YouTube chat. Marlene says it would have to be a supernatural drawing of the heart because the dispersed tribes were sent to the nations to become them that they no longer know that they are Jewish. It's like they lose their identity, and we do have that come out. This was their desire and their punishment. You want to be like the nations? You will be, where you will worship their gods and are lost to who you really are. And isn't that the case? We see that over and over. Is you get some of the in other words, you get what you ask for. All right, I am inviting Clody. Clody, how are you? Welcome. Shabbat Shalom, my friend.
Shabbat Shalom. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Great. So, uh, I listened to the class, and I loved how the legacy of those great two grandsons becomes the legacy of Jacob's sons.
Yeah.
So I couldn't join from the beginning the class how we ended up in this topics that we are talking now, but I think that this is the point when you started. So I just wanted to share a thought
Okay.
that I often have. So I often think, even when I talk to people about God and about whatever, I often think about how was the world before the Abrahamic era. So I think that people didn't have a clue about God and creation, and they feared a lot of nature. So everything that they feared, they gave a God's name.
Mm-hmm.
So then comes along Abraham and says, no, there is only one God, one Creator, that we should fear Him and walk with Him. And then I think that I always remember a verse, or sometimes verses from the Bible, that call Israel as a priestly nation.
Yeah.
It is a nation that has pointed to all the nations of the world, even um, even through Christianity, that there
Yep.
is only one God. So yes, modern Christianity, or even the third century Christianity, wanted to make a polytheism out of Christianity. However,
Sure.
I think that most of people are not quite sure about Trinity, and they seem to believe that there is only one God.
Right.
So I think that the legacy, as important as it may seem now, I think that at the end it will never, it will matter not so much, because either way Israel's duty is to make known God's name all over the place,
Yeah.
and everybody will eventually know who is God and what has happened with creation. So I don't know if I'm hitting any spot with that.
I think you
But
are. Yeah.
thank you, Joshua. Yeah. So I was like thinking that legacy is very important for us, that we are starting to understand that we should go back to Abrahamic faith, as you and Dr. James Tabor put it. But on the other hand, it won't be very, very important.
Yeah. No, I
That
absolutely
was my
get
thought.
what I absolutely get what you're saying. And if you think about it, this is, talk about that legacy. This is the mission. It's the mission of Abraham, and it's the reason, we get this in Genesis 18 in verse 18, 19, where he says, "Should I tell Abraham what I'm going to do?" Yes, because Abraham will teach his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord. I remember when you were talking, Clody, towards the end, this verse came to my mind in Isaiah 51. "Listen to me, you who chase or pursue righteousness," the translation says. "You that seek Jehovah, look to the rock from which you were hewn and to the quarry from which you were dug. Look to Abraham your father and to Sarah who bore you, for he was but one when I called him, but I blessed him and made him many." And it goes on. And then, down in verse 7, it's talking about the people who have the teaching on the heart. So I think this group is a beacon in a dark world in terms of deity and God. And like one of the things I'm working on, I told Seth sees me working on my part for the classes that are coming up on the Northern Prophets. And of course, I have to, just because I'm like this, like I have to see every angle to understand something before I can present it in a class. So I wanted Seth to understand why I'd been working for 3 days on a single topic, because he's probably, like ready for me to come, let's get moving. And I was studying one thing, and one thing is Baal, the god Baal. So in the last several weeks, I've been reading not only every piece of, how do I say this, almost like the Baal Bible. So we have cuneiform tablets that were discovered throughout the ancient world, and I can't read cuneiform, but I can read the translations. So I wanted to read their verses. So like in our Bible, this is going to make a point, Clody, kind of what you were talking about. In our Bible, we see that Baal and the worshipers of Baal are the bad guys. They're on the other side. And like Elijah is battling the prophets of Baal. So Elijah, we know that Baal, you mentioned how these other gods might be named because of a natural phenomena like storms and clouds and lightning. And so Baal is one of Baal's godly traits is they thought that Baal was in charge of the weather and controlled the rain. And so why is it that Elijah wants to shut down the rain? That's the first thing we get in 1 Kings 17. Because he's battling the people's thoughts that their gods served the rain. I mean, brought the rain and controlled the storms. So now this is weird. This happened to me this week. So I was reading these songs to Baal because I want to understand that side. Some of these date to roughly the time of where Elijah is fighting the prophets of Baal. And I didn't notice that outside the clouds were coming. And as I read one of these songs, very similar to our Psalm 29, by the way, how Baal would ride on the clouds and all this stuff. And as I was reading it, thunder and lightning hit and it started raining. And I closed the book really quickly. I was like, Jehovah, you understand that I'm doing it? It was kind of weird, but these people actually associated the storms with these other gods. And I see your point, Clody. This is the case with the 10 plagues as well. We see all of these elements that come out in these ancient superstitious beliefs. Like, for instance, in the classes that are coming, I want to give the viewers both sides of the story. Yes, here's Elijah's words against Baal, but here are what the worshipers of Baal would have heard in their churches on Sunday morning in these ancient land of Israel. So anyway, I kind of got off on that, but I wanted to give you a little bit of an idea confirming what you said about these other gods and so forth. So now you have a chance to follow up. That may have had nothing to do with necessarily what you were saying, but anything else for us, Clody?
No, it was exactly that. But I just if I would follow up a bit of whatever we were talking about, it's like I'm really eager to your Jono's and yours podcast on Wednesday about Moses Shapira's scroll. So I really wish the best for that, because
Thank you.
I'm eager to see at how simple it is to be a God believer and to walk with God. It is so
Excellent.
easy and it became so difficult
Yep,
during religious people.
I agree.
That's all.
We have a tendency to make things way harder than they need to be. I would agree with that. Thank you, Clody. And I'm happy to see that you're registered for the
Thank you.
conference. I look forward to meeting you in person, as many of the others also have signed up. We've got a couple of other hands raised. So thank you, Clody. I am going to bring up on the stage, let me see. I think Sue is next. Sue, welcome. It's good to see you with us. How are you today? You'll unmute and we can all hear you. There it
There we
is.
go. Now you can
All
hear
right.
me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I really enjoyed the lesson today, and you were mentioning that we had lived in Jordan. We went there originally as Christians. We had learned about a little community in Aqaba, way down by the Red Sea there, that was focusing on Jewish and Christian reconciliation.
Uh-huh.
And very informal. It wasn't an organization or anything, but they were Messianic believers and would make it a point to go over into Israel whenever possible. And we would meet with Orthodox Jews and work with them. And the upshot of it is about 7 of us actually left Christianity because of our contact with those wonderful people. And what was exciting about that was that there are Orthodox and, just Jewish people there who are waking up to the job that God gave them, which is to teach Torah to the Gentiles.
Yeah.
And they've resisted that for centuries because the church persecuted them. And our friends like Rivka and Ilan Lambert and Jeremy Gimpel and a few other people like that,
Sure.
they get a lot of persecution from their Jewish community.
Yeah.
A lot of Jews don't like that the Gentiles are being taught, but it is growing, it is encouraging, and I just wanted to add to that conversation earlier about the heart calling you. That's what happened with us. Our heart called us to Israel, and I just treasure the time. We actually got to live in Jerusalem for 3 months, and that was probably the most amazing time of my life.
I bet.
So
Wow, that's
just
incredible.
pray for the lovely people whose hearts are calling them, And I agree with Clody that the Abrahamic faith couldn't be more perfect. It is so easy, so tailored to the human condition. It can be lived in any culture, with any language, and with ease. And I'm so grateful that our Father understands our nature so well.
I appreciate your sentiment and can agree with that. I always tend to like the people who are the helpers. It goes back to I think Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood probably said it best. It's always look for the helpers. Who is it who's trying to build people up and help people understand their culture and where they come from? Who is it that's doing that? I tell you, I'm not a real fan of people whose sole mission is to bash or make fun or ridicule or put down someone else's religion, and they think that that's their job, and I don't know, that I don't like arrogant people. I don't like cocky people. I just don't. I'm just being fresh and honest with you. But people, Jeremy, I've had Jeremy here in St. Francisville years ago. I know Ari and Jeremy very well. I've been to their place, and like I said, Jeremy has stayed at the little local hotel here in St. Francisville. So, it's people like that I really like. I don't have to agree with them. They don't have to agree with me. But it's the people who are ushering others towards truth. That's it, and that's why it doesn't bother me if somebody. Like I've seen people get their hair ruffled up because a Baptist church is doing a Passover Seder, and these people get on, they bash them, and I'm thinking, yeah, look, I happen to know some of these people, and just a few years ago, they were singing songs to Jesus in their church, eating pork hot dogs in the parking lot after. So when I hear them griping and moaning and making fun, I think, yeah, well, I won't tell you exactly what I think, but I tell them I want to say, go read Ezekiel 34. All you're doing is muddying up the water for others. So, Sue, I would agree with you. I love those people who are doing those work. I don't know Miss Lambert personally, but I've read her book. I know people and I think you mentioned that your story is in there, and I need to go back and look at that.
Yeah, it is, although it's really ironic. It was written when we were still Christians.
Yeah,
And I remember one line in there saying something about, I can't imagine that I would ever leave Jesus or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Would I love to go and erase that line? But there are so many wonderful Jews now who are working with Gentiles to ease their way.
yeah,
And and there are many converts there who are doing the same, who've
yeah.
come out of the church, they've converted, and now they're working with wannabes. And it's a wonderful thing to see and experience.
Very good. Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for your comments, and hopefully you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will roll down and catch the next person. Thanks for that, Sue. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. All right, I'm going to bring Miss Betty. All right, Betty, you're back on the stage. Welcome again.
Thank you. I won't be long because I see other people talking. I've already had kind of a long term.
All
But
right.
I wanted to say too, amen to Jeremy and Ari. I love them. Years ago, they were doing, think they called it Saturday Night Live in Jerusalem. It was an online thing that was for everybody, but it was actually live in Jerusalem, and they were actually teaching Gentiles, and they did get a lot of criticism. But any of you who are not familiar with Jeremy Gimpel and Ari Abramovitz, they are at thelandofisrael.com is their website, and they have lots of good things. And I know Jeremy's wife also teaches, and she's excellent as well. The
Yep.
only other two things are just two phrases that I got from my brother that I love, and he used to say, and still does, that Christianity is basically a watered down version of Torah. But it's watered down, but some of us couldn't take the whole Torah all at once. We have to have it with water in order to assimilate it and let it come into us and, understand it. And so it is a watered down version of Torah, and it's where a lot of us started. And the
Yeah.
other thing, earlier you mentioned the hand of God, the hand of Yod He Vav He, and that is, in Hebrew, it's the Yad Tovah.
Yeah.
And I have felt since I was a little girl that Yad Tovah has always been there, like right behind me, older. And it's a blessing that I thank him for every day. I thank God
Excellent.
for, not my brother.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. One other
anyway,
quote that I remember your brother, and then I'll bring Miriam up on stage. Years ago, I think it was part of the 5 fundamental flaws of evangelical Christianity was the class. And I remember the quote was that he was talking about the New Testament in its present form. And he said, the New Testament is poorly translated, heavily interpolated, and paraded forth in its Hellenistic pagan dress. And I have quoted that many, many times. Of course, I never thought at the time that I was quoting that I would find textual difficulties with the Hebrew Bible, which I have now. Very obviously, they are there. And I think it's important that, as I've made it clear so many times over the past, particularly 4 years, I'm no longer part of the choir that is going to look at Christianity and make fun of the Christian New Testament and their beliefs, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to say, but I have the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. And I'm reading from the holy, inspired, inerrant, authoritative, blah, blah, blah. You get it. What I want to do now, though, is as I move forward in my life as a person of faith, a man of faith, but at the same time as a historian, I want to be honest to Moses. I want to be honest to Jesus. I want to be honest to God. I want to look at all these ancient texts, and I will look at these texts in a new light. Years ago when I said, well, Christianity and the New Testament has problems, but I'm going to go look at the Hebrew Bible and turn to the Pentateuch. It's perfect. There are no mistakes in it. Moses wrote it word for word. I was part of the group that made fun of, and said, well, look, we have this and your texts are corrupted. And I was part of that, but I am not part of that club anymore. I think it's time that we are truly honest about these things, and I think it's going to help. I think it's going to bring people to the truth, ultimate truth, and not just siding with someone, kind of early in the game, if you will. Betty, always
thanks, Ross.
appreciate.
I just wanted to say thank you. You're saying thank you to me. I want to say thank you to you, and I agree. I was part of that club too, sadly, and I'm no longer a member. So
Yeah,
that's it.
I turned my card in. Hey, have a beautiful day,
Yeah.
Betty. I'm gonna get Miriam and
Thank
all right. Miriam, my friend, let's get this thing going. How are you today? All right, looks like you're unmuted. Let's see if we can hear you. I don't hear you yet, but maybe look down if you see on that lower left of the panel, you'll see a microphone. Make sure that microphone is not red. You can click that microphone if you're not. Okay, we'll try it again. Don't be a stranger. If you get an opportunity to come back, come back. I wanted to say one thing. There was a lot of discussion that came up about, again, who is Israel. We won't go into all of it. I think Dave was wise to say that's probably for another time. But I will say this. We do have people who are very very much into this, the nations, certain nations equal certain tribes. Yair Davidi and some of these others have put this forward. I don't espouse, in other words, I don't sign off wholesale on those beliefs, and I'll tell you why in just a few minutes. But before I do, now I see I've got some other hands raised. Let me see, Joshua, I see you, but I'm going to try Miriam again first, and then I'll bring you up. Let's see if Miriam is working now. All right, Miriam, let's see if it's working now. I don't see it yet, so we're going to keep trying in just a moment. I am going to bring up Joshua. Hey, Josh, how are you today? Shabbat shalom, my friend. I see the machine thinking, look, there he is.
Shabbat shalom.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, sir. And yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off. You had gotten onto a good idea there, and I was listening to you. I
I
was
listen
thinking
to
about
myself
something
all
that,
the time. I want to hear what you have to say. I listen to me all the time. I'm looking for something new today.
well, so we were in text during the class earlier, and there's this phrase. I was trying to look up the exact quote, but it's until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled.
Yep.
And you mentioned there's only one other place in the Hebrew Bible that that exact phrase is mentioned.
You want to know where it is?
Yes, sir.
All right, so it's not in the Hebrew Bible, interestingly enough. It's
Oh, that's
in,
where I remember it from.
do you know where it's at now? Did I give you a clue?
You gave me a clue. I'm trying. It's been a little while since I've read the New Testament.
Okay, yeah, me too. It's been probably a decade or so. But it clearly is that exact phrase, Melo Hagoim, is the phrase. In other words, if you look at Melo Hagoim in the Septuagint, which is the Greek, and you say, okay, this Greek is equivalent to this Hebrew, how is this Greek used? And so also the Hebrew version of the Greek of the New Testament. Romans 11:25. In Romans 11:25, Paul uses that phrase. Interestingly enough, Romans 9 through 11 are the New Testament's version of who is Israel. So it's interesting that at least now, I'm not saying I sign up to Romans 9 through 11 and say, yep, I agree with all of this, but it is interesting that this particular passage, he's making a reference, and it clearly to me seems that he's making a reference back to this passage. It's the only place it could make sense. So,
Right.
yeah, it's until this fullness of the nations, there seems to be a filling. The nations in their fullness are going to come back, which ties back to a point that we heard earlier in the dialogue where we were talking about, people of the nations coming to faith. So,
Right.
yeah, I didn't mean
I
to be
think about that
misleading.
because the Almighty tells Abraham. I'm sorry. Or does he tell Abraham that his children are going to be subjugated in Egypt until the time of the Canaanites are fulfilled?
It
Am I saying
uses
that right?
it close. Yeah, you're very close. It says until the sin of the Amorites. The Amorites is a major study. We'll have to get into that at some point. But yeah, the Amorites is what's used there. So what's the difference in an Amorite and a Canaanite? You got to dig deep. So, but yeah.
I've listened to this Bible study a couple of years ago that you did, and you did a good job of breaking down the different tribes there. And speaking of that, republishing this series has been meaningful to me because I watched it when you first did it last year, and listening to it again, just it makes it really click a lot more.
Well, I
We
appreciate
were
that.
listening to. Yeah, man, we appreciate you. I mean, your scholarship is, I'm I know I'm always telling you this, but we like the way that you break it down. I was talking with Ruth this morning. We were catching up on last week's parsha, and the section about Joseph giving his brothers, an article of clothing, towards the end. And I was like, that whole business got started with an article of clothing that his dad gave him. And they got ugly with him because they were already resentful or something. And then when he finally reveals himself and they start to reconcile, and he gives them the articles of clothing back. Anyway, we talked a little bit about that this morning. She was thinking about the theological possibilities, what that could mean.
Yeah.
And I said something about, well, if it were me, I would have rubbed it in their face and said, y'all did this for evil to me, and I'm trying to turn this into good for y'all. And she said, don't use the phrase rubbing it in their face. He wasn't rubbing it in their face. He was using it as a reminder.
Yeah.
Well, she's probably right.
She might be. She might be relating to. I think if I did it, it might be to rub it in their face. But maybe he had higher, purer motives. But in a way, I mean, if you look at the story, he certainly made the point. And now that we see the thing about the garments, this and garment change, it is sort of a, it's all, you all started because you hated my beautiful, colorful, my long sleeve jacket. And now look, I have so come around that I'm now pouring these garments on you. So it is kind of a tongue in cheek anyway. Can you imagine when they realized it? So,
and I think he was telling them that he loved them, even though they treated him like garbage.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We were just talking about it this morning. I think he did mean it from a good place, and the conclusion that he came to, that God allowed this to happen and turned it into something that he was going to save the lives of all of them by sending Joseph first. That was this is a really meaningful section. We've got a lot of Josephs in my family. So
very good.
Anyway.
Outstanding. Hey, thanks, Josh. I appreciate you, man.
Yes, sir.
Tell Ruth I said, hey, see you next time. Maybe Wednesday if you got time. All right. Let's see. Whoop. All right. Now, let me bring up on the stage. Let me scroll back. Okay, Karen, let's see if that brings you up. How are you? Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. I have a small confession to make.
A small
I was in
confession?
the wrong group. Yeah, I was listening to elevator music and dozing off and missed most of the discussion. Drives me nuts because this is one of my favorite subjects.
Well, I'm gonna forgive you, and if that's what brings, if that's what I have to do.
Yeah, I've been studying the Gathering and like that for a long time, rabbit hole after rabbit hole, watching all the documentaries and reading all the books. And yeah, I don't think that there's like some secret tribe hiding somewhere.
Right.
When I think it's in Isaiah where it talks about them as individuals rising up like poplars, declaring I am the Lord, writing their name. These are individual people,
right?
Not groups, and they're will eventually find each other, but they do it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing. And I look through the prophecies and I try to think, what's it gonna look like? What is the time gonna look like when this happens? And you see things like knowledge will be increased on the earth, which it has with the access to the internet. And then there was one that I've been looking at lately in Zephaniah 3.
Okay.
And I think it's like the only time that this is mentioned. And It's verse 9, and it says something about they'll all speak a pure language.
Yeah, that's right. Zephaniah 3:9. That's exactly right.
And I question that word, that translation, pure. I know it's like, I think that word is only used once, but there are other variations of it, and sometimes it's more like clear. It means clearly or clear.
I'm gonna look. But
And
I think if I recall, it's a single lip. I think it's the word echad in its root form. Um, let me
okay.
let me look at that. Let's see. Zephaniah 3:9. Let me pull that up on my phone. I have different Bibles open to different verses because you've brought up so many cool things we have to talk about now. 3:9.
Okay.
Let's
My question
see.
in that verse also is about that verse is he referring to the whole world? Like, is the whole world going to have a shared language of some sort, or is it just going to be, those that are gathered? Because I almost see it
It's
as
yeah. Go ahead.
everyone going to speak it. I almost see it as just like a worldwide thing,
Yeah.
but I'm not
Well,
sure
let me tell you. I think you may be
because
right. First,
everyone is from all throughout the world.
yeah. We do have this idea, first of all, on whether it's the whole world. You do have this idea in Zechariah 14 where all the nations, literally all nations, will have to send delegates to Jerusalem to worship Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yehovah, if they want rain. Now, if you choose not to get rain, for a year, you don't have to send anybody. But there is this idea that there is this global reach. Micah starts off in one sense where it says, and they, other nations, shall walk in the name of their God, but we'll walk in the name of our God. But this Zechariah 14:9 seems to be a universal Shema. Now, let me I want to make sure I give this right. On Zephaniah 3:9, it says, because then I will convert, or let's see, the word is in Hebrew, it really means to turn to the people a lip. Shapha is a lip, a plain lip. Brura means, it can mean pure, but you're right, it is very strange. Now, I made a mistake. I thought it had one lip, but here's where I was getting that. It says a plain, just a basic language to call all of them on the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and that they may be one, basically. So it does have the word one, but the lip itself, the language, it seems to be a conversion to a singular, simple language. Now, I was going to ask you, do you see this Zephaniah 3:9 as a reversal of Genesis 11, where all the languages were confused and complicated, maybe?
Yeah, kind of. And I see it happening today, and I'm sorry it's not Hebrew, even though I think many of those who are gathering in, they have a basic understanding of Hebrew.
Yeah,
But if we're going to look at it worldwide, everybody's speaking English.
yeah.
Like
Well,
less than 5% of the world is a native English speaker, but over 20% speaks English.
right.
And it's just growing and growing. They're teaching it to their children in grade school in India so they can, you know, work in the business world. When a Norwegian and a Japanese businessman get together, they're not speaking Norwegian, they're not speaking Japanese, they're speaking English.
Yeah.
Everyone is starting to have this shared language, and that never happened. I mean, 50 years ago, that wasn't a thing.
Well, and I think we would
Let
all
alone
agree.
thousands of years ago.
Yeah, I've kind of like you. I've kind of like to think that one day we're going to all wake up and be fluent in Hebrew, because that would certainly help me. I mean, I struggle. I
Right?
spend a lot of time trying to learn it, but I'd just like for God just to touch me in my sleep, and I wake up and go, oh, and I can just speak it fluently. But I
Yeah.
don't know that that's going to be the case. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think it is.
And
I
I
still
look at
think it
English.
is.
English is an interesting language, and it is very clear. Sometimes we have translation issues because the translators are trying to translate, this concept into a single word, which doesn't work. But you can use English and add more words because we have a lot, probably more words than any other language, or we're up there.
Yeah.
So it can be brought across and it can be translated. You're generally going to need more than one word
Yeah.
to translate concept.
When
Um,
you first came on, Karen, you mentioned the passage in Isaiah, and I had flipped to that before we jumped elsewhere. But it's in Isaiah 44, and it says, "Hear now, Jacob, my servant, Israel, whom I've chosen. Thus says the Lord, Jehovah, who made you, who formed you in the womb, and will help you. Don't fear, O Jacob, my servant, Jeshurun, whom I've chosen. I will pour water on the thirsty land, streams on the dry ground. I will pour my spirit upon your descendants, my blessing on your offspring. They shall spring up like a green tamarisk, like willows by flowing streams." And this one will say, "I am Jehovah's." Another will be called by the name of Jacob. Yet another will write on the hand, "The Lord's," and adopt the name of Israel. So that's a very powerful passage.
yeah,
And it
and I see
describes
there's
what's
those
happening.
individuals doing that. Yes, and there was what was the other one? It's just left me. What was I thinking?
That's all right.
There's a number of them that just like I see these things happening. Um, and then one last thing I want to say is I was watching. I like the archaeologist, the naked archaeologist. What's his name?
Simca.
Oh,
Simca.
Simca.
Yeah.
He did this video, well produced video on the lost tribes, and whatever, he was trying to find him here and find him there. But at the beginning of the video, he says, when Ephraim or the lost tribes figure out who they are and do what they're supposed to do, they initiate the apocalypse, he called it. And
Yeah.
I could never figure out quite what he meant by that. Because, like, he didn't reference a scripture.
Uh-huh.
He didn't, but I think that this gathering of, will trigger changes of some sort in the world.
Yeah.
So he may have a point.
Well, we one of our
Oh, I
past.
remember what it was.
Okay, go.
Sorry. And I can't remember. I should have looked this up before I talked about it. But somewhere in one of the prophets, it talks about, even though they're lost, the tribes the word of God will never leave their hearts,
Yeah.
or they will always. And I see most of us come out of Christianity.
Yeah.
And what's the first thing, we're talking 5-year-old Sunday school that you get taught? It's the 10 Commandments.
Yeah. That's a good point.
So even though we are in idolatry, we are still being taught the 10 words
Yeah.
as a child. For the thousands of years that it's been in existence, they've been still continuing to teach that. And I see that as a fulfillment of prophecy, is that even though they're in idolatry, they still teach their children the 10 words.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Good points. I'm telling you, and it's things like this that draw us. I mean, I remember as a little boy falling in love with the biblical text, and that love has continued every day. I mean, I never go anywhere without my Bible. I mean, I've just always have it with me, and I think many of you are the same way. It's like in fact, I pulled up next to a woman at the post office yesterday, and I almost said something to her because, I mean, I'm kind of a freak about my Bibles, as far as like taking care of them. And she had her Bible. I see sometimes people put their Bibles on their dashboard, and I almost knocked on her window and said, "Hey, excuse me, don't put your Bible up there because look at your pages. See how your page? Look how pretty mine is. See, you could." But I didn't bother the woman. But I thought about it. But no, but she's like me in that sense. She carries her Bible everywhere, but she needs to learn to not put it on her dashboard. So if any of you do that, just don't put it on the dashboard. Makes the pages swell.
Maybe she was thinking it as theft deterrent.
As what
Put it up
deterrent?
there. Maybe nobody's going to break in and theft
Oh,
deterrent.
maybe so. Maybe so. Yeah, could be. Hey, I look forward to seeing you at the conference too. I know that people are
Yes,
signing up,
definitely.
so make sure if people that haven't signed up yet, make sure you sign up. This is going to be fun. All right. What else, Karen?
I'm going to let somebody else talk if they want to.
Okay. All right. Well, have
If
a
I think of
beautiful
anything
day.
else, I'll post it.
All
Okay, you
right.
too.
All right. Bye. And let's see. I will move Karen to the audience. Thank you very much. Let's see. I think we have someone else with the hand raised. It's Eric. Hey, Eric. Welcome back to the stage with me, my friend.
I was going back to the little bit before talking about languages and scripturally thinking, it seems what I'm seeing is emunah is going to be the language so that it doesn't matter what you speak because our Father doesn't need any one language. He understands us from where we are. And with the language of emunah, we are all one. And it's the knowledge of that and learning emunah that will unite us a whole lot quicker than words on paper.
Now,
And
most people know, Eric, but tell them what emunah means, just a translation of it, even not necessarily give them a full class on it, but what does it mean?
that's hard to do, but it's basically faith, but it means total faith and trust.
Yeah,
That's as quick as I can
that's good.
complete.
No, that's excellent.
And when you do that, and I mean, all these teachings that I've been dealing with for 20 years now come from rabbis in Israel,
Yeah.
and they're not meant for Jews. They
Ah,
don't teach to a religion. They say religion, or no, they say religious folk, most of them don't have emunah. They have the book learning, and that
yeah,
doesn't count.
yeah,
Discussing, learning, and one of the things I've seen is all these versions and this, that, and the other that we like to discuss. Are they the hidden things that our Heavenly Father put in His texts to make us start wondering and thinking and going, I guess we're supposed to search these things out. If it was all one language and all this, that, and the other, just like if He gave us everything we wanted, we wouldn't want to deal with Him. But by golly, it sure does make us think and work, doesn't it?
yeah.
Bless
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Eric, again, I'm happy that you're slated to come to the conference as well. Everybody that has not signed up, I'm encouraging you to, because I know some of you, I haven't said publicly that you're coming. And you may say, "Hey, I signed up too." Well, I'm looking forward to meeting you. One of the best things about these conferences is that people get together and they get to know each other, and that was one of the takeaways. Seth went with me to this conference, the last one at Charlotte, and on the way back, that was his big takeaway, was that, as he put it to me, people need a place to meet. They need to come together. They want to share with each other, that kind of thing. So that's the whole point of what we're trying to do here with HOREB, with Discord, with everything we're doing, is trying to create a place where people can come together and share. We can pray for one another. We can lift one another up. We can help each other learn. Look, I learn every time I talk to you. Many of you bring up points that make me then spend hours pondering different things. So it's mutual exchange of information, and it's always good to meet people who think like we do, at least to some degree. So you guys really make my week when I get to hear from you and get to see you. We're trying to keep an eye also on the YouTube. Let me just quickly glance through that. Because I did a better job of it, but some of those comments there, I see Carolyn talks about, she agrees, a reversal of the Tower of Babel, just like it used to be French. I think she means by that the universal language. But look, everything that we're working on together is going to bring us closer together as a community, and I appreciate your time on that. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Aaron Thurber says he was late. I made a comment about the genetics, and he says one thing to note is most commonly available DNA tests only look at the X chromosome and only go back 4 to 5 generations. So, you know, I mean, look, again, that's a little bit above my pay grade in terms of my knowledge, and I readily admit that. But, you know, I went to 23andMe or whatever, and I basically, I think I spit in a tube or something. I forget how you do it, but it's been a long time. But I was hoping they would come back again and say, yep, you're the son, the grandson of a great rabbi, just whatever. I don't know what I thought. But what I found out was that I'm 99.99999% Northwest European. So who knows? But as Karen pointed out, Isaiah 44 is really an interesting picture of what's going on. If you look at it, it looks very, very similar to what we see going on in our day. So if somebody says to me, well, Ross, I know you kind of interpret what you see around you, all these people from Christianity and other religions, they're coming to a more of a faith that's centered on the Hebrew Bible. I know you think that's some kind of prophetic fulfillment, but I don't think we're there yet. What I would tell that person is, listen, okay, let's say you're right. And what I will say then is when the real deal happens, it's going to look just like it does right now. You're going to see people coming to the same conclusion. So if somebody says, well, it's not this, it's not now, get ready. You're getting a good practice run then, because when the real thing happens, it's going to look very similar to what you see. Hopefully, everyone has a wonderful week. I thank you for joining me. Wednesday, members of the Yakad can join me right here with Jono. We are going to start a new series on Shapira, the study of Shapira, not only the text that is associated with Shapira. I mean, there are many texts. You're going to learn a lot more about the person, about the mysteries around him. And I have become more and more convinced that not only did he come to possess an ancient and authentic manuscript, I have become more convinced, and not less convinced, but more convinced that it is absolutely the oldest biblical text that has ever surfaced. And I think we're going to find it. I think we're looking hard for it. And I think by the time we work through some of these seasons, Jono and I are basically going to put most of our energy, we think, on this Shapira study. So week after week after week after week. For those that aren't part of the Discord, I know that some people don't want to be. They can't do it, whatever. It's okay, because later we'll post these videos on YouTube. So hopefully you can catch it either way. So join us Wednesday for that. Next Saturday, we begin our study of the book of Exodus. Josh, I appreciate you saying that you're enjoying these. We're playing, some people, I hope no one thinks, oh, this is reruns. These are the last pass through for me, the most recent pass through the Pentateuch, and we have them for every week. And it's a perfect time to get us together. We can talk about the Pentateuch, while Seth and I are now given an opportunity to really develop some other teachings. So thank you all for joining us. Have a beautiful Sabbath. Thanks for your participation. Love you guys. See you next week.